Hello and welcome to the ArcSeer System Feature Tour. In this short movie I want to run through some of the key features that ArcSeer brings to the field of archaeological data representation. First thing to say is that we will be using the upland peak site of Petsofa, which is located in East Crete, as our test case. Petsofa was used during the second millennium and possibly even as early as the first millennium, and as such it falls within the study of Minoan culture. I don't want to delve too deeply into the past significance of the site, but just to say that there are two main periods of use, the first of which probably began sometime in the late early Minoan period, and it is speculated to have had a ritual significance associated with the people who practice some sort of transhumans culture. The second phase is thought to have been more monumental in form, and this shift being explained by scholars to represent the centralization and conventionalization of cult practice by the palace centres, with Knossos at the top of this new social hierarchy. So let's return now to our ArcSeer screen, and I want to discuss very quickly the basic fundamentals of the user interface. On our left here you can see we have a series of panels. On the top, the first one is labelled user info, and this gives us information about the current user logged in and his or her level of access. Our standard level of access here allows us to edit and to view data. The second is a reconstructions panel, and these reconstructions are quite analogous to the layer format in GIS, for example. Next we have a sound panel, and finally we have an hour of the day, which these will become clear as we run through the tour. The rest of the screen then shows a view into this virtual landscape which has Petsofa as its focus. You can see here we have a female figure who gives us some sense of scale. And now the next question is, how do we move around this environment? Well, it's quite simple. We basically move around using a combination of the mouse and the keyboard. So to move our head, we basically just click the left mouse button and we move it about. So we can basically move left, right, up, down. To move forward, back, left or right, we use the arrow keys, and if we want to jump, use the spacebar. So let's move over here and let's situate ourselves within the landscape. You remember that we're at Petsofa, which was in East Crete, and that's on the south side of the Palicastro Valley. And you can see here we have a view down into the Palicastro Valley with Castri in the north and the bay here, Palicastro, and the sea on our right. So, returning to our site, let's move into it and have a look about. So we're on the inside of the site now, within the retaining walls in this terraced area. You can see here we have possible spatial divisions, which have excavators say are probably associated with phase 2, which seem to divide up our space. So let's move down here. Okay, you'll notice that when I moved the cursor over certain objects, they changed color. They went yellow. This means that they're basically data objects. They have data associated with them, and if we want to access that data, we simply click on them. When we click on this object here, we are presented with a dialog box which contains lots of information about this object. We have empirical information at the top here. We have a description, which in this case is not very useful. We have images. We can click on an image here and we get a photograph of that feature. You can imagine here you could have lots of other graphical representations here, like plans, sections, anything that might be useful for the archaeologist. Let's close that there. We also have this other neat feature, which is a web resource set. And basically here we can have URLs that are associated with this particular feature. Perhaps there's a JSTOR document that mentions it, or this type of object. If we have the right level of access, we're able to add URLs here so that other people can share in that information. The same idea for comments. Down here we have basically a forum type conversation going on about this object, and we can add our own comment here if we want to engage in that conversation. So just before we close that, it's worth reiterating that this is a very powerful feature, because generally, database style interfaces are they're very abstract. They tend to abstract the original find context for archaeological data. ArcSeer doesn't do that. It presents data in a much more naturalistic way. Okay, so let's return to our discussion of reconstructions, which we mentioned briefly before. Now that we have a view of the whole site, we can look at these two other reconstructions. Our default layer is today, so that's what we see if you were to visit the site today. But we can also turn on, we're lucky at PetSofa in the fact that we have two reconstructions, one for each of the periods that I talked about. So let's turn on phase 1 simply by clicking on it. And we are presented with this schematic view of the phase 1 form. And you can see here we have a terrace area with some sort of altar feature, and then finally we have a bonfire here. So let's now have a look at phase 2, which you'll remember was thought to be much more monumental in form. Wow, okay, so there's no getting around that. That is an impressive building. If we go back to today, you can see there's quite a difference between the extent remains and what this proposal suggests. If you know anything about Minoan studies, you'll recognize this as a tripartite form, and you'll see these motifs, the horns of consecration, and you also see the Minoan columns. We can engage with this reconstruction by moving about it, and we can actually even go inside and we can experience the environment, the interior, and we can experience the outside from within. We can also experience this site not just from its immediate environments, but from a bit away. If you were a pilgrim coming up to visit this ritual site from the Minoan site of Palicastro in the valley, you might approach it from this way, approaching its facade from the east. Okay. Another aspect of ArcSeer is that it embraces this whole idea of multisensory archaeology, or phenomenology in archaeology. And so at PetSofa, you'll notice that if you were actually to go to the site, it's not a site devoid of sound, which we don't hear any sound now. It's a very windy site, and that is very much a feature of the experience you have when you actually go and visit it. So let's turn on the sound. Okay, and if we go up to the top here to be exposed fully to the wind, we are now buffeted by this sound of the wind, and that is very much, as I say, an aspect of experiencing PetSofa in the real world. Following on from that, we have this idea of the movement of time. We can see our sun there moving slowly through the sky, well, a bit faster than in real life, and if we drag our slider here at the hour of the day, the sun moves through the sky and eventually sets, and it is nighttime, and we're able to experience PetSofa at night, which gives us another feel for the site and an interpretation, another layer of experience. So that's a very brief introduction into some of the features of the ArcSeer system. If you'd like to find out more about the project, please visit our website at www.arcseer, that's ARCSEER.com. We hope you've enjoyed this tour.